In life, views are everything. Everything. Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thanks again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time out to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be utilizing your time to do something else, so we do appreciate you tapping in with us today. As always, if this information is valuable and you do find it enlightening, we do ask that you subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll be notified when each episode is released. We put out a new episode each and every Friday, which can be heard on all podcast platforms. And then for those of you who would like to watch the podcast, you can watch it on YouTube. We put out that video each and every Wednesday. But as always, we thank everyone for taking some time to listen to the podcast today. And welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today, I want to talk about a topic that not sure how many of you have heard of this. This was new for me, so obviously I'm going to introduce it. And if you have heard about it, then you are definitely a step ahead of me. And if you have not heard about it, then welcome. We're going to learn about this together. But today I want to talk about grade inflation. Grade inflation. And this was a term that I had not heard about before. And how I came about this was I'm just flipping through YouTube, looking for something to watch, just to, for a couple of 20, 30 minutes kind of diversion from, regular life. And this video comes up about this child at a school in Maryland, in Baltimore, Maryland. And this child basically is a high school student, and the mother called the news station because he was basically given community service hours and did not do any community service. And some might hear that story and go, okay, well, what's the big deal? Part of the problem is, number one, I guess in the state of Maryland and other states as well, community service hours are a requirement for kids in high school to graduate. The other thing is that, again, the mother said, well, he didn't do any of this, so I don't know why he was given these service hours. Couple that with the fact that this same parent years ago called the news station because this same kid was given a passing grade on classes when I guess he was in middle school at that time. But the problem was he was not in class when he got the grades. He was out like sick with a sickness or something like that. And he was given passing grades. So she called again to discuss this with the news station there. So let me play this real quick, and then I'll jump back into grade inflation and then go from there. But check this out.
Cheated out of an education. Tonight, that mother tells Chris Papps it's still happening.
Me standing on Fox 45, pissed off.
Project Baltimore first met Tamika Harrison and her son in 2017.
African American, they're filled up with prisons. They're filling up with the grades. I don't want this for my son.
Harrison was upset with the grades her son had received on his report card. 2 A's, 2 B's, and a C. Seems like a good marking period. Which was the problem, because Harrison's son at the time had a medical condition. He wasn't in school.
If he gets these A's and B's, damn it, it better be because he's earning them.
A student given a falsified report card by Baltimore City Schools. Harrison told Fox 45 it was happening in 2017. 6 years later, she says it's still happening.
As fraudulent can be. If that's not breaking a
a law, I don't know what is.
Harrison's son is now 18.
Wow.
Fox 45 is not naming or showing him. He attends Renaissance Academy, a high school in West Baltimore. And here is his most recent progress report. Take a look at this section. You can see under Student Service Learning Hours, he's completed 103 and a half hours.
And I'm going to stop it there. So that kind of backs up to what I was saying. So on his report card, it's showing that he's got 103 service hours. The mother says he didn't complete nowhere near these amount of service hours. So this same mother who went through having her child basically get grades 6 years prior when he was, I guess, middle school, or it might have been elementary, I don't know, out with a sickness, was given A's and B's. 6 years later, now he's in high school, and basically she called to say, look, they're doing the same thing again. Now they're basically just trying to pass my kid to get him out of the building. Well, it was that video that made me start researching, right? And so what I'm researching, or what I was researching, I wanted to see what, first of all, why is this still going on, right? Because this has been going on for as long as I can remember, where they're just passing kids and trying to get them out the building, putting them out, without any real education. So I was starting to do some research on that, and that's when I came across this term grade inflation. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about grade inflation. And again, for those of you who know, congrats, because I definitely didn't know. And for those of you who don't know, let me just read a definition of what this is. Grade inflation, and I'm reading a report here from the American College Testing Organization, better known as the ACT, for those of you who know about the standardized test. And I'm going to talk about this report because this report here was something else, but I'm going to read the definition that they have here. Pull it up here for you guys watching on YouTube. So it says here, the phenomenon of grade inflation can be defined as the assignment of grades that do not align with content mastery. And, basically in layman's terms, they're basically saying the kids, when grade inflation occurs, the kid gets a grade that he or she does not deserve because they have not totally grasped or don't have the knowledge of the class that they got the grade in. So if the kid is taking the math and they basically have a C worth of understanding, but they got an A, that's called grade inflation. And the assumption of this report is that grade inflation is occurring. It goes on to say that based on this report that grade inflation, and again, this is their survey that they ran, or their study. It says grade inflation, there was evidence of grade inflation from 2010 to 2021 that they ran this particular report. Now, why am I talking about this? Because again, that story that I just played from, what was that, Fox 45 in Baltimore, made me look into, well, what's going on? Is this a regular occurrence that they're still passing students? And based on this report, it's suggesting that not only is this occurring, but it's occurring on a national scale. But I preface that and I say, pause, wait a minute, right? Because for those of you who don't know, the ACT, better known again as the American College Testing Organization, they administer what is called a standardized test. And for years, easily a decade or so, there has been a movement in this country to get rid of standardized testing for high school students. And for those of you who are listening outside of the country, standardized testing here in the United States is utilized at the high school level to basically utilize as a determination, an additional determination to whether or not a child will be capable of being admitted to a college or university of his or her choice, and also whether or not they will have the ability to perform at that level, because obviously once you get to college and into a university, it's a different level of education. But there has been a push for decades to get rid of standardized testing because many feel that it is racially biased. Why do I bring this point up? I bring this point up because in this report from ACT, they go on to say that not only does this study show that grade inflation has occurred for all students, and that's a direct quote, but they go on to further say that although it has occurred for all students, that minority students and students of vulnerable populations have benefited more from grade inflation than white students. That's going to make it very plain. And that's what kind of raised my eyebrows. And I go, wait a second. And so, of course, with this, part of their suggestions are that in order to accurately determine whether or not a child would be successful, standardized testing needs to stay in place. That's essentially what they're saying, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this report. So to give some numbers, some of the numbers that they've reported out, but essentially that's what they're saying. Well, why are they saying that, right? Why are they saying that? So just to give some additional context for those of you who may not know, during the pandemic, well, let me jump back a little bit. As I said before, there has been a movement to get rid of standardized testing because it's been shown that it's, or I should say discussed, that it's racially biased. And the argument has been that it's racially biased because a lot of the knowledge that are on these tests, especially when you start getting into the reading, writing, and even the math portion of it, a lot of the knowledge that's on these tests, kids from minority neighborhoods and groups and vulnerable populations do not have that information to be able to accurately or successfully test or pass these tests, which of course then leads to that child not being able to move on to the next level of education that he or she is seeking. And in addition, there has been this movement. Let's fast forward. So now we get to the pandemic. The pandemic occurs, and many universities and colleges make a decision that they're going to become what they call test optional. And test optional basically means that, and not to go through the whole thing, but when you apply to college, and for those of you know, and I'm just giving this information from maybe someone who doesn't know the process or what the process used to be, the child has to put together, they have to do the application. They may have to write an essay. They have to submit their transcripts to show what their GPA is. Their GPA is their grade point average. And then also they would take either the SAT or the ACT. They would submit these scores to the university, and the university can make a determination whether or not this child is qualified to come into their university. That was the standard, right? You had to have your ACT, your SAT. Pandemic hits, schools are closed. Say, well, kids are not able to prepare because there was sometimes preparation. You could take classes or your teacher or your local school will prepare the kids. They said we're going to do away with it. Going to go test optional, and the standardized tests are not required. Well, now you have children who are able to apply to college and don't have to submit SATs or the ACT. Why am I giving a history of this? I'm giving a history of this because I'm trying to shed a light on why this report, in my opinion, was put together. Because the ACT, since it's no longer required, ACT says, well, wait, we've got to show our value because we have children who are not taking our test anymore, and it's costing us money, right? Now, they blanket it as, oh, the children are not adequately, adequately prepared to be in college because a lot of these kids are showing growth in their grades because of grade inflation. See, they'll just create terms, to prove their point. But is that really the case? Is it that it's just grade inflation? Do you really believe, and I'm not suggesting either way, I'm just asking the question, do you really believe that grades have just increased because essentially teachers and schools have just made a decision that they're going to pass everyone, kind of like the story that I played earlier at the start of this of the kid in Baltimore? Or could it be something else? Could it be, I don't know, that the playing field is starting to become more equal because everyone or majority of people now have access to that information that was once so tightly held and suppressed through racial bias and poor funding methods of schools that have were in certain neighborhoods? Is it possible because many parents of minority children and parents of children of vulnerable populations have now ascended to a level from an education standpoint because you're dealing with the highest generation of college graduates easily within minorities, Black and Latino, and then you have a tremendous increase in women who have obtained college degrees and now economically viable. Could it be that? Because what they're suggesting is basically that that's not the case, that this is being artificially done and that it needs to be basically changed and standardized testing needs to come back. Matter of fact, let me read this article that I was reading from Forbes, which I was like, they can't even hide the bias. So I'm reading this article from Forbes on grade inflation, right? Because again, I was looking into this because I had never heard of this term. And there was an article on here that came out in September, and it's entitled "Grade Inflation is Not a Victimless Crime." And they basically report from, they highlight some of the information found on that ACT report. But this one line is what really got me. Towards the end, last paragraph. Finally, and I'm reading directly, finally, colleges should take care to ensure they're using credible measures of student preparation, which suggest a U-turn for all schools that have ditched the SAT or ACT. And it's that line, for me, that suggests that this report from ACT is just not being done or was done just out of the kindness and concern of making sure that children are truly qualified to be in college. I personally think, again, this is not evidence-based. This is a personal opinion that this is being done because obviously they want standardized testing to come back, and they're going to utilize this report as evidence of why it should come back. Do your research, stay on top of your A game, because there is a push to bring these standardized testing back. It is not only a push from a bias standpoint in terms of racial bias, but there's also a economic benefit connected to this that they want to exploit, and that they don't want to lose, because obviously these tests cost money. I believe the ACT is like $93. I think it's like, if you take the writing, it's like $60, and then if you add on the entire test, it's like $93. Then you have the SAT, it's like $60. You're talking about literally millions of kids that take this test every year, and they don't want to see that go away. And those of you who have listened to this podcast, you know, everything for me, it goes back to the money. I just trace it back to the money, and then I get a lot more explanations on why things are happening, because that's how it works here in the capitalist society. But that's my time for today. That's what I wanted to talk about. I know I'm really not. The solution is stay on your game and spread the word of what's going on, and stay on top of this, because I already source, based on some of the reportings, you have schools who are in 2026 saying that they're going to go back to standardized testing requirements in addition to children submitting for hours. They're going to go back to admission tests for students to be approved or to be accepted to universities. A lot of them are going back to it. Even starting next year, they're going to start going back to it. So look out for that, and voice your opinion, make it known, because that's the only way things like this get changed and get put on the radar, so to speak, for all of those that are affected. That's my time for today. I hope this information was enlightening, as always. If you'd like to leave a comment, you can reach me at any of my social media platforms. I'm at I am Trey Evans on all social media. You could also reach me at the People's Voice Podcast, which is on Instagram. But as always, dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.